to our We Grow with Love 4 convention. My name's Lori and I'm an addict.
Hi, Lori.
Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. If anyone here represents a media agency, please contact Jeff R. The members of the North Central Indiana area of Narcotics Anonymous welcome you to the 4th annual We Grow with Love convention. We would like to thank you for joining with us in this celebration of recovery. We are deeply grateful to Narcotics Anonymous and find great joy in being able to express our gratitude here with you, our family. In Narcotics Anonymous, we are certain that when we come together to share our lives and our love with each other, a miracle happens. Our recovery takes hard work, courage, and commitment. Those are the things that carry us through as we seek the spiritual growth that comes from working 12 steps. Never alone, we do this together and for each other, knowing that we need each other because more than anything else, we grow with love. The preface to the basic text begins, "The full fruit of labor of love lives in the harvest, and that always comes in its right season. For us, our season has come." Do we have a Just for Today reading or a book? Alrighty then. We won't do the reading. I'd like to take time to introduce the first workshop speaker. I really don't know much about her. Matter of fact, I just met her at this convention. What I have seen is her commitment with Responsi, and I've seen a lot of love and a lot of secure foundation. With that, I'll give you Gwen.
Mary Gwen.
Oh boy. Hi, I'm Gwen. I'm an addict. And when I first got in here, Gary got me before I even registered and asked me to do a workshop. And I saw God's will versus my will. I figured that was the one for me. I guess God's will is the one that made me sign my name next to it. I guess because a lot of the times, most of the time during my addiction, I was under my own will. And that's why I'm sitting under these tables today. Because if I had followed His will, I'd still be the good girl my mother and father wanted me to be all along. Not saying I'm a bad girl just because I'm an addict. I think it made me a better person. But my own will did get me in a lot of trouble. I don't know, it makes me think sometimes maybe everything I did wasn't wrong, it was just the way I did it. And if God's will had kicked in when it should, but maybe it was there all along, I just didn't use it. I know my own will, in a way I can turn over and kick my own self sometimes, because some of the things I did, I've made people cry. And I don't think it was because of what I was saying or doing at the time. I think it was because their own actions as to what they did. They saw themselves in what I was saying at the time, because I know I felt the same thing when I hear other people share sometimes. I feel me, especially last night at the open speaker. I mean, there were so many times I wanted to cry, and I know my own sponsor tells me sometimes that I have so much pride, that's what keeps me from cleansing myself, because they say tears are a cleansing process. And I know I do that. You know, I hold them back until I'm with myself. That's when I know I let them go then. For me, that's what I have to do. It took me a long time to get with the spirituality of God's will. And only until, I'd say last year, is when I really understood what His will was all about. Just in the last 6 months, people have been coming to me, and I'm saying, oh my goodness, I sit back today and I say I've helped 2 people. I saved 2 people's lives because in the last 2 months, 2 people called me and they were about to commit suicide. And it was like 2:30 in the morning. And one night was it was a storm that had came through Flint, and it was really bad outside. The wind was actually howling, and I got a phone call from a young lady, and she was kind of just almost hysterical. And first thing that she said was, "I'm about to commit suicide." And I asked her, I said, "Would you please just do one thing for me? Just go to the hospital." That was the first thing that popped into my mind, let's go to the hospital, because I remember one of my counselors told me that if you ever are confronted with someone that was about to commit suicide, don't go to them. Just give them a suggestion. And the first suggestion is always tell them to go to the hospital. Because who knows, that cry out may not be for help, it may be for to take someone with them. You know, God knows I don't want to be that. I've done a lot of things, but the last thing that ever crossed my mind was suicide. I know I harmed my body in a lot of ways, but I never wanted to harm it myself. I'm a coward when it comes to that. I know that, thank God I am. Because today I do enjoy life, and I enjoy seeing people live life, you know. And I know I've had a full life. I raised a daughter through my addiction. She was on her way to college when I came into recovery. And young man and I were sitting out down by the fire talking about the kids and the money we spent in our addiction. He was saying the money he spent in his addiction when he was, and how his son calls now and asks for money. And the money that he could have just gave him at that time, you know. And it kind of clicked in with me too, because I'm sitting here now. My daughter just went back to grad school, you know. And if it had been my will, I don't think she would have made it through the first 4, you know. And I know God's will kicked in, because he brought us both. He sent her to college, and he brought me into these rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, you know. And that was truly God's will, because if it had been mine, I'd have been in trouble, and so would she, you know. And today I am a proud parent, you know. I love her to death. She's doing the things, she's having the kind of life that I always wanted to have, you know. And I can still have it, you know. Seeing her do the things in her life that she's doing makes me want to go back too. And today I am back in school, you know. Another 2 years and I'll have my bachelor's, you know. It's going to take longer for me because I'm working too. But that's only giving me the motivation to keep doing it. I come to different meetings I go to. There's a lot of professional people. 2 of my closest friends are doctors. And one's a gynecologist and said, "Nah, I can't go there. We just going to be friends." But another one's a dentist, and he's still having a hard time staying clean. But he'll always be a friend. I still have the faith. I keep the faith. I have a sponsee. She keeps going in and out. But I'm not the kind of sponsor, I'm not going to kick you to the curb just because you can't do it my way. You know, because it's not always my way. You know, God going to kick in sooner or later. And it's not, like I say, my will. If it was my will, I would, you know, keep her beside me all the time, go pick her up for meetings all the time. And, you know, she'd have been at this convention with me if it was my will. But I couldn't find her, so it wasn't my will, you know. God's taking her through what she needs to go through right now, you know. But when she comes back, I'll be there for her. You know, I'm not that kind of sponsor, you know. I don't know the book from backwards to forwards and forwards to backwards, and I don't know all the traditions by heart and all the steps by heart, but I know when I'm using them. I know how to apply them in my life, you know. And only through God, I know, I'm aware of when I'm using one of the steps or one of the traditions, you know. And I'm glad to have that intuition, comprehension, you know, not to know it all the time. I know I've never been a Bible thumper, and I never really liked Bible thumpers, you know. Don't preach me the Word of God. There was a convention I went to last year with Show Me, Don't Tell Me, you know, and that sticks with me. And I love conventions for some reason. In the 6 years I've been around, I go, The only world convention I missed was Paris. And the only reason I missed that was because I weighed the options. Okay, is this money going to be spent on my house, or is this money going to be spent in Paris? I spent it on my house because I'm going to be there. I got to come back here. I'll just make Paris another time. Maybe even if it has to be on my own, and that's God's will. Because if it had been my will, I'd spent that money in Paris. But it's okay today, I talked to people that went, and you see, sometimes you have to feel and see things through another person's eyes. And I don't mind that today. I have fun doing that. Just going to this like a speaker last night. I felt and I saw what she went through, because some of the same things I went through too. Or the single parent thing, I was there. I lost a husband, Mine a little quicker than hers. I was only married not even a year. 3 months after we got married, God didn't see fit for us to stay together. So within that, before a year was up, he was gone. That was devastating. And I sit back and think sometimes I'd have had 10, going on 11 years clean if I hadn't relapsed. I had 5 years clean at the time he died. But I lost it all, But it's okay, I'm back now, And if it hadn't been for God's will, I don't know where I would be today, because sometimes I throw up my hands and say, whatever you want to do with me, do it, because I'm your servant, And I went through the church thing and all of that, My sister is what they call a saved person. I've never experienced, where you go to some churches and they say you're filled with the Holy Spirit. I feel I have the Holy Spirit, but I just express it in a different way. I don't think it takes a lot of verbal actions to let someone know that you have that spirit within you. I guess I have the calm before the storm. And so far there hasn't been too many storms, thank God, I've had some in recovery. My mother's had 2 open heart surgeries. I went through them. She was a very sick woman, and she still is, but she's still with us today. My father, he's got a bad heart now. We just found out a month ago, and I'm going through it. I love my parents dearly because they put up with me and my bullshit for a long time. And I know they always say there's no such thing as a black sheep. Oh, yes, there is. Oh, yes, there is. And I'm sitting right here. Out of 6 of us, I'm the only one. And that I know of. Okay? But I know life has been beautiful with me. And I've only experienced it in the last 6 years in being in Narcotics Anonymous. Because today I know how to let God's will work in my life. Sometimes my will doesn't work all the time. If I try something and it doesn't work, I throw my hands up and said, okay, what's next? And that's enough for me today. I don't know, I sit back and think I got a good job. I own my own house, and I take care of it. I could ride down the street and see other people see houses and junk all over the yard. How do they live like that? I'm not a perfectionist, but I know how I like things in my life to be. And there has to be some kind of order for me to maintain and keep what I have, even in my recovery. There has to be some kind of order. I have friends that call me misorganization. That's okay, because that's what I have to have. I'm not afraid to tell somebody, I don't like you today because of this. I'll let you know why. And if you're not going to be a constructive part of my life, I don't want it. I try to be an optimist, not a pessimist. And I don't try to have things or people in my life that's going to be disruptive, because I can move on and move out of the way and be happy. And that's all that matters to me, is just to be happy. Do the things I want to do, and if it's not always a want, need to do, for me to stay clean. And I know that's God's will, because I know how to move out of the way and let him come on through, or her, whatever. I have a God of my understanding, and that's all it is, and he understands me. And it feels good to be in the outdoors. I never did think I could come through something like this. I can't be in one of those cabins, but I can. I could deal with the lodge, you know. It's just good to feel life, and I like the theme of this retreat. I know some people call it a convention. I call it a retreat because that's what it is for me. And the theme of it is we grow with love, and we do. Every year I come, it's more and more people. This is my third one. And I know when I leave here, I'm filled with love. You know, I can go back and I talk to my sponsor. I brought my own telephone with me. And I called my sponsor this morning, and she said, just say a little prayer and get up there and let God's will take over. Because if you do it your way, you'll say the wrong things. Just don't plan it. Just get up there and do it, you know. And that was good. And I just love to hear people say, I love you. Mm-hmm. I really do, and I like saying it because you know when it's said and it's meant. And I know I had my father. He admitted to me a couple years ago that he was an alcoholic. And I looked at him and I said, you know, I knew there was something, and I love you. And he said, I love you back, and that was the first time he ever said it, and we embraced. That felt so good. And today, now, we talk on the telephone before we end our conversation. Either he says it or I say it. And those 3 words, I love you. And I know that's God's will. And I'm going to leave here tomorrow, and I'm going to be just full. And that's good because it takes me through the rest of the way. I have a very stressful job. I'm not a parole officer or anything like that. I work for one of the big 3, but I'm in management, and right now we're going through one of the biggest turnarounds, you know, and I know I get stared at, and, you know, from the hourly workforce, you know, and I don't care. I have a job. I don't look at it as a career. It's a job. And God put me in a position where I am today, and I have to do the best that I can do for what I have today, you know. And I can't let anybody else get in the way of that. Through God's will, I will keep coming back to these conventions, you know, retreats, whatever. I will be there. You know, I'm already set for the World Convention in St. Louis. All I got to do is go. And I get overwhelmed the first day I always get there because I jump right in both feet. Hands up, like jumping into a pool of water. Okay, here I am. What you gonna do with me? And I love it though. I wouldn't give anything for this life. And that's Narcotics Anonymous. That's what it means to me. I've tried other fellowships, but this is the one for me. And I'll keep coming, and I'll keep letting God's will rule me. Thank you.
Okay, my name's Lori and I'm still an addict. The next person that I'd like to introduce, our co-speaker, is someone that I've known since I got into program. Really was intimidated by her at first. She didn't say much, but what she did say had a lot of powerful meaning behind it. Sort of like I felt like with my sponsor the first time when I talked with her. I admire a program that Anita works, and any suggestions that I hear come from her, I know are from the heart and not from her head. That I'll give you Anita.
My name is Anita and I'm an addict. I'm grateful to be clean today. You know, it's strange that you should say that about your sponsor because your sponsor and I grew up together. You know, for me, my will got me into this program. You know, doing things my way and not paying attention to my higher power. Because I got rid of my higher power a long time ago, before I got to the program. Yeah, I was raised with the strict religion thing, you know, and taught religion, but not taught anything about spirituality. And I didn't know the difference. And I didn't know that I could talk to my God. I didn't know I could get angry with my God. I just didn't know those things. And when I first got clean, I came in through a different fellowship, and that fellowship was one that more or less focused on a letting go process. And I'm real grateful for that today. And I know that that's what I needed at the time. It took me a long time to find NA and to decide that that's what I needed. Because I had, and I had people, I had friends telling me, you're in the wrong fellowship. And I'm like, nah. And I wouldn't listen to them. But deep down I knew, but it's that addict thing, don't tell me something, because it's just not going to happen. I've had a lot of good times in recovery. The last 3 years, however, have not been real great. And I even, 7 years ago I was divorced, and I don't even consider that any real setback or any real bad thing in my life. But the last 3 years have been real trying for me. And I try real hard to look to God first and to do what He wants me to do, not what I want to do. Not that I don't do what I want to do sometimes. My dad died 3 years ago, well, 3.5 years ago. And if my will would have had anything to do with it, my sponsor would have stayed at home, but instead she was with me when my dad died. And I tend to forget to really look at my life and look at what happens and see what's going on, to see God at work. It's like, oh yeah, okay, duh, But at the time, I just kind of let it happen, and then I have to sit back, take a step back, and really look at it. There was also a point, Januaries have not been good the last 3 years. It seems like Januaries I always find out something bad or something bad happens. But there was a situation that happened in our house that I think I was really scared about what I was going to do. I was planning things in my head about what I was going to do and how I could get it done without actually, doing things myself and not being responsible, and not being held accountable. To the point where it scared me, and I had to get vocal about that and say, this is what I'm thinking, and this is what I want to have done, and I know I can't, I know I can't do that. But you mothers will understand. I mean, you just don't fuck with my kids, and that's kind of what had happened. And I went on a real mind thing with somebody who hurt my daughter. And that wasn't fun. That really wasn't fun. But I've had a lot of things where God just kind of stepped in and took control, and I didn't know until later. I can remember one day waking up and just really wanting to go out and use, and not being able to call anybody, and not being able to go to a meeting, and just being real, I just immobile. I just could not move. And a couple addicts showed up at my house, and we ended up going for a motorcycle ride. And we got home, and a couple addicts ended up calling, and, you know, before I knew it, I had, like, I don't know, 5, 6 addicts at my house, and we were having a meeting, you know, on relapse, of course. You know, the last probably 3 weeks have been a real roller coaster ride for me. Trying to deal with other people, or another person in my life. And I'm trying real hard to take a step back and say, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. To the point where I am willing to let my daughter go in order for that to happen, so that God can just, you know, get in there and do whatever needs to be done. And, you know, that's rough. That's rough for me. Because anybody who knows me knows that I adore my kids, both of my kids. And, you know, unfortunately, divorce is not really a fun thing, and there can be some problems with that. And kids get caught in the middle sometimes. And it doesn't matter how much recovery you have, you know. I really thought, well, shit, you know, I've got all this clean time, it's not going to happen to me. And that's just not true. You know, and I was, you know, my will would have my ex right in this room today. You know, I was convinced that he was going to be here today. And I thought, well, you know, I'm not going to speak. You know, it's just not going to happen. So I was, like, not nervous, okay? Because I knew he was going to be here. And then at about, I don't know, 10:30, he hadn't shown up, and so I'm like, oh, shit. So, you know, I know that I need to be up here. Where I live on a lake, and it's real quiet, and it's real serene up there. And you would think that with that, or you know, sometimes I think, well, with this kind of environment, you know, I've always got this contact, you know, it's just always there. But I have to be reminded to sit back and you know, sit on my couch and look outside and look at the lake and turn the stereo off and, you know, ship the kids off to school and just get some quiet time and you know, get that contact back. You know, and I'm not real good with the steps either, but there it says conscious contact with God. It doesn't just say, well, you know, just wake up and it'll be there. You know, I guess that's why they say you have to work the steps, because it's, you know, you just don't get it through osmosis. You know, I really wish. I don't know, I'm real grateful to be here this weekend. And I'm real grateful that right, you know, now at this time that Lori asked me to do this. I wasn't too keen on it last night after I said yes. And, I don't know, I just feel real good this weekend, despite a lot of things. I'm real comfortable with some decisions I've made, you know, as far as my daughter goes. Yeah, I guess I have to share. I've been, like, talking this to death, but I really gotta do this. My ex called the cops on me, because I still can't believe that this happened, okay? My ex called the cops on me a couple weeks ago for neglecting my daughter. And I've been in like this game situation, almost like a tennis match or something, to where I don't want the ball, you know, and I don't want the racket, and I just don't want to be out on the court. I've been trying real hard not to play. And what I honestly believe is going on is that my daughter's being used because my ex wants back in the house, and that really kind of pisses me off. And I know that what's happened this time, when he came back and said, well, you know, I did it again, I fucked up and I want to come home, I know that God put the words in my mouth to say, no, I'm done. Because we've been back and forth for 7 years, in and out of a relationship. And, you know, when I quit listening to just my head, and I don't get my head and my heart together, you know, I've been doing that for 7 years. You know, there's no love for the man, but yet, you know, I just kept taking him back. It's that insecurity thing, you know, and it's, you know, but this time I know, you know, I just know that it's okay and that I'm all right, and you know, I just don't want that. I don't want it in my life today. So God has given me the strength and the self-esteem and all the things that I need to be able to say no. And so now he's pulled my daughter into this, and all this shit is going on. You know, and all this kind of went down on Mother's Day weekend. You know, and it's just been real sick. And I've been trying to really keep sane about this, and that's why I keep talking about it so much, because I know that that's what I need to do. Because I can only hear God, really, through you people, you know, through other people. So I share my pain. You know, I was told to do that, I've been taught to do that, and I tell other people to do that. And it was real hard to confront my daughter and say, you know, do you want to do this? Do you want to go live with your dad? And to have her say yes. Because there again, my will is, you know, not my kids. My relationship is too good with my kids to have them want to go live with their dad. You know, and that's just not the case. You know, I've talked about her leaving with other people, and to have people say to me, well, you know, that's really not a safe environment for her. That's really not a good place for her to be. And there's just something that's telling me that I got to almost force her to do this. You know, I can be a real good caretaker and a people pleaser and an enabler. And, you know, I did that for a long time with my dad. I did it for a long time with my husband. I will not do it for my kids. And I guess for me, I look at allowing her to say, yeah, I want to go with Dad, and to tell her dad, okay, come and get her. I look at that as kind of raising her bottom, so to speak. Because if I can continue to protect her and to continue to keep her away from his sickness or his insanity, yeah, I really feel that that's only really harming her. And, you know, I think, well, okay, I've given him the summer. Whether he takes it or not, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. We're supposed to talk again. But, yeah, I know that she'll come back. That's what I pray for, that she'll come back. You know, and today I really feel that that's going to be God's will. And, you know, I'll let her go there for the short period of time that I'll let her go there for, and let him do the damage that's, you know, going to be done, so that I've got the next 4 years to kind of repair that damage. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen, but my will says that that's what's going to happen. God knows that that's what I want. God knows that, you know, what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. And I've also accepted the fact that she might stay with her dad. So what I'm going to do with all of this is talk to her and see what she really wants to do, and let what happens happen, you know, and just be there for her. I've tried real hard through this whole thing not to badmouth my ex in front of her. I'm not saying I don't badmouth him, because I do. Bad. So I don't know. This has been a real, get in touch with God type thing. It's been a real learning process for me. I always tell people when they come to me and say, oh God, I've got this decision to make, I always tell them to listen to their gut. And of course, I've not been doing that with this. So I'm listening to my gut, and with the decisions that I've made, my stomach is not all in knots. It's not all upside down and inside out. So I know that what I'm doing is right. And it's like the first step, acceptance for me in that first step means just I have to accept it. It doesn't mean I have to like it. So that's kind of where I'm at with the whole situation. And I'm real grateful for that other fellowship that I started out in, because I think that's helped me more than anything with, the letting go and just turning it over and saying, okay, just take it, God. And I also know that God got me into NA because I'm in NA today instead of that other fellowship, because I am more comfortable with people in NA than I ever was with those other people. And I need you people in my life in order to be able to do what I'm doing today. And that's all I've got. Thanks.
Before we open up the floor for sharing, I do have a couple of announcements. Just a reminder, there's no smoking in any of the buildings, in the lodges, in the cabins. There are cigarette butt cans all around the grounds. If you have trash or cigarette butts or whatever, please make sure they hit a can. Also, we are being taped. If anyone would like to come up here and share and does not want to be taped, just let me know. I can shut off the tape player and turn it back on when you're done. Thanks. Floor is open.
Good morning, family. My name is Sylvester. I'm a recovering addict. The topic coming up, God's will or my will, I wanted to share on this because for so long in my life, I always had my mother's God or my grandmother's God. They raised me with, it was mandatory that I go to Sunday school and church in order to go to the movies in the afternoons. It was mandatory that I went to choir practice in order for me to go to the basketball games. See, I always had to live by their God rules. And for the first time in my life, I don't have to have grandmother's God in order for me to do God's will. For the first time in my life, I have a God that I can relate to, that deals with me when I was running the streets and acting crazy. See, my grandmother didn't do these things, so her God just didn't fit my lifestyle. I was also that black sheep in the family. I'm the baby of the family. And everybody beat my butt because I didn't do grandmama's God's will. Mama's God's will for me. See, I was always totally against the rules and regulations of the house. If anybody got a whooping, it was me, because I just refused to do God's will in grandmama's house, and that don't work. See, when grandmother says you're going to do so-and-so, you're going to do so-and-so, or God's going to whoop your butt with grandmama's stick. So I had to change my perception of God's will for me. And today, he was the guy that was looking out for me when I was driving my car at 90 miles an hour and didn't know where I was going. You know, God's will for me, through me beating my head up against the walls, you know, trying to find ways and means to get more, he saw it fit that I didn't bust my head open. God's will for me today is also for me to even have the privilege of being here. I do possibly some of the footwork, but it's through God's grace and mercy that I'm able today to say that I even have a God of my understanding. I do some studying in the oldest book in the world, but it's also to get a basic understanding of me, because God's will for me today is to broaden my horizon in all areas. And I look at my will as some of the crazy things that I do in recovery also. You know, I still drive 90 miles an hour sometimes, you know, but I know God is with me in the process, you know, and he will slow me down, you know. To understand what I know today about God's will for me, it's for me to work some of these steps that my sponsor keep kicking me in the butt about, you know. But it's in God's time and not mine. And a lot of times I always have an excuse about not doing what I'm actually supposed to do. But I have this internal mechanism I call my ulcer, you know, and when I do not follow God's will, my stomach immediately tells me something ain't right, you know. And as much as I love to eat, I'm probably the smallest guy in the room. But when I can't eat, I know I'm real sick, man. You know, when I cannot eat 5 meals a day, you know, I know God's will ain't right in my case, you know, because I can't eat. You know, and then I'm sick and all this kind of crazy stuff. You know, and I get back on the track. My sponsor tells me sometimes, you know, I'm on the tracks, you know, and I hear the train coming and I see the light and I ain't got sense enough to get off the track. Yeah, and then I wonder, you know, and that tells me that I'm doing my will rather than God's will. You know, I can hear the whistle blowing, but yet and still I'm going to see how close the train is going to get before I get off the tracks. And I know that's my will, not God's will. Because there have been many times I wanted the train to hit me and I didn't have sense enough to get off the tracks. So today, I know in doing God's will, and that's one of them is by being here this weekend. I've got the greatest sponsor in the world. I mean, I tell everybody that, you know, because he's taken me by the hand in a lot of instances and has brought me to places like this to get in contact with God of my understanding. And I'm very privileged to have a sponsor like that. And God's will for me is to continue to work this program and spread some of this love that's all around. Thank you.
Yeah, I got mine. I'm Ray, I'm an addict. I don't know, I've been around a few 24 hours and God's will and my will. When I was a newcomer, like the gentleman was just sharing, you know, God, that scared the hell out of me because I was raised in the same thing, I think, like a lot of addicts, you know, that it's a punishing God, that you did all these things, he's going to punish you for it. And so my will at the beginning of my recovery was doing a lot of things, but it was God guiding my will that I didn't know about. Because when I first came around, and I've shared this, a lot of people probably heard it before, you know, I had just got out of prison, and I was in the Alcoholics Anonymous Fellowship, because I didn't know there wasn't Narcotics Anonymous, because it wasn't a big fellowship around this area. And I was going to a meeting, and it wasn't there, so I walked in this door, and they said this was Narcotics Anonymous, and I was like, what? You know, and it was about maybe 5, 6, 7 people, and I sat in the back of the room like a typical newcomer, you know. I was like, okay, I'll sit back here and just see what this is. You know, and I never would admit that was God guided me to that meeting. He wasn't there, you know, Narcotics Anonymous was there, and, you know, and I made it there, and got to the end of the meeting, and we give hugs, you know, and it's like I was comfortable with a handshake, but I wouldn't let you, I wouldn't let you hug me because that's intimate, you know, and this guy came up to me and said, we give hugs, and I said, no, it's all right, you can step back, I'll shake your hand, you know, and I'll let you get that close, you know, because that's where I was at, you know, but that's how I found this fellowship, and I had to get credit to it but it wasn't my will, because like just getting out of prison, and I just relapsed. I had like 3 years clean, and I just relapsed, but I still knew I didn't want to use because God put 12-step fellowships in my life, and it's like, it seemed like a little bit better way to live, not in all the, you know, but I didn't want to work the step. And when I first went to meetings, when I got out, it was hard because I didn't know nobody, and it was like, well, I'll go to meetings anyway, and sit in the back of the room and leave, and I'd want to use, so I say, okay, I want to use tonight, so I'll go this direction, and there was a train on the track, so I had to bypass the train, and I went another direction, and it seemed like there was a big line of traffic, so I turned another direction. Next thing I know, I was in front of where there's a meeting. It was like, well, I guess I'll go in there, you know, instead of... But I never would give that God credit, you know, that was my will trying to find a way to use, but he kept turning me around till I got where I was supposed to be, and I said, well, I guess I'm this close, and 5 minutes till the meeting time, because I knew it was there. You know, but I never give God credit for that. That was my will guiding me. You know, it wasn't him turning me this different direction, because I didn't know that, you know, because I believe in spirituality, and I know there's a higher power, and I know that it guides me in different ways, and I meet different people. Like here, you know, I meet a lot of different people, and got different people in my life, sponsees. Like we were talking last night, and being in prison and being in the military, I had this big hang up about homosexuality, and I didn't like them. I thought they were this and this and this, and God put this individual in my life that was a homosexual, and he said, I'd like you to be my sponsor, and I said, uh-oh. But being in the program, it taught me that I took him in and we talked, and I realized addiction doesn't have homosexuality, addiction doesn't have these things. It just has this disease, you know. But in my head, it was, you know, I ain't gonna get close to you, buddy. You know, and that's being honest today. But today I understand it's a disease of addiction. You know, it doesn't have labels. But when I was new, I had these labels, you know. And I grew up in the projects, and you know, being in the military. So, you know, I mean, I know people have hang-ups with different racial hang-ups. It's like, why? You know, because I grew up in a poor family, and I have, you know, today I'm not, but. And, you know, and I grew up, when I went to school in the 60s in the riots, and I'd be the only white guy in a big black neighborhood, you know, but I had a lot of friends because growing up in the projects, and to me, you know, like my wife even says it, she says, you know, even people I can't stand in recovery because their personality is my personality, and that's why I don't get along with them, but if they ask and I ask them, we will travel distances to different functions together. My wife always says, how can you do this? Because recovery, like I said, has no boundaries, and I have to put that first, you know, and that's God. And I never give God credit for that, because that's just me. I'm tough, you know, I'm bad, you know, I can do these things, but today it's God's will that did all that. It wasn't my will, but I wanted to make it my will because it sounds better when it's my will, not his will, because that's our ego, that's our character defects, you know. And we grow in this program, like, you know, like this convention, we grow with love. I think the people that come the first year, and they come back the next year, and they come back the next year, you can see the changes in all of us, you know, and like everybody says at the end of the convention, bring a friend or two, and that's why it's growing, because the people are bringing those people. We bring newcomers, we bring people to experience this. Then I hear people now going, we don't want to get too big now, you know. That, you know, I told all my friends, well, because if you were here the first year when it was 37 people, you know, it was a real tight group. You know, it was like more being in a big meeting for a weekend, you know, and then it went, and like one guy was, you know, I've met him all 4 years, and he goes, yeah, I used to be able to come and get away from all my people at the meetings. Now I told them about this place, and they're all here, you know. And that's God's will that they're here, you know. It's not our will. You know, we can sit here, you can plan things, you can do all you want, and it's not going to happen unless our higher power wants it to happen, and I had to come to an understanding of that. And like I say, a lot of this God's will and my will, I always had to say it was my will because it sounded better that way, because that's my ego and that's all these character defects talking. But today I know it was God's will. It's God's will that the relationship I have, I can call it healthy, and I never knew what a healthy relationship was, and I can say the friends I have in the fellowship, we may have different opinions, or and opinions everybody has, but we're still there. We still help each other, like what Anita was sharing, that when you're really down in the dumps and you're thinking about all this stupid stuff, somehow God has somebody call you and say, hey, we're going to do this tonight, you want to do it? And that's His will, but but me, I won't admit that's God's will. That's all I knew that was going to happen there. But today I know that's God working in my life, and it's God that works in my life where you don't hesitate when an addict's still suffering, and you'll drive them to a detox center, or you'll go somewhere to pick somebody up. That's God's will, because you don't think of that. But my will make me relapse real quick, because I know there's a lot of people, and it's weird this year, there's a lot of addicts that were in recovery that's died from active addiction. They went back out, used and overdosed, that I've known, that I've known in recovery. It's like, wow, why did this happen? But that's God's will. I feel that's God's will doing that to show me that that could happen to me too if I don't follow this. And it's a shame that they had to die, but like it says, they died so I could keep my seat, and today, in active addiction, I wanted to die. I was too scared to pull the trigger in my head or do that, but I could use all the dope I wanted. And I was really trying to kill myself, but I wasn't brave enough to kill myself. Today I don't want to die. That's my biggest fear. It's like, man, I got so much to live for and so much to do. That's like, I hope to God that He doesn't take my life now. But I know He did. It was my turn to go, but it's like, my will says it ain't my turn to go. I got all this stuff. It's like I got all these plans I need to do. But if I didn't get that done, that's God's will, not mine. I can't change that. And by the grace of my higher power, that all these people show up every year, and the people I look for, there's some people here that were here last year that just couldn't make it this year because we get lives in recovery, we get responsible. We're in active addiction, we weren't responsible people. Today we are. So sometimes you can't make it, and that's God's will that they weren't supposed to be here because they had to take care of other things and they're being responsible. But inside I was really looking forward to seeing them, And I used to go to a lot of conventions early in recovery, and I don't no more because I'm getting more responsible in my recovery. That was being irresponsible. I loved going to those things and meeting the people, but I was being irresponsible to myself. And that's God's will. I can put all these things in God's will, but they weren't God's will until I got rid of my will. And that's how this program worked for me, And like I said, I wasn't looking for Narcotics Anonymous. I was looking for a relationship because I just did 3.5 years in prison. I said, hey, I wanted a woman. I didn't want recovery. I wanted a vehicle. I wanted all these material things. But today, I know that the material things came because of working the program, because I'm not using, because they'll all go out the window. Because I still have my coffee cup from prison with my DOC number on it that I had for the whole. I don't know how I kept it for the whole time I was in, but I got out and it still has. It's a yellow coffee cup with my DOC number, but now it's a pencil holder, and it's like. It's a reminder. My wife said, well, can I put that away? And it's like, no, it's got to stay. Because that's where I got recovery, started at, was incarcerated, and then now I'm in Narcotics Anonymous. And today I don't have hang-ups. If people want to do like I did when I first came around, I didn't know what I was or who I was, so I went to a lot of different fellowships. And there's nothing wrong with that, I don't feel, because you have to find who you are, where we belong, because not everybody belongs in this fellowship. We all, it'd be nice if everybody that came to Narcotics and I was never used again. We all became real good friends, and we, all these wonderful things. But the reality is, God's will is, people have to die in active addiction. We have to have family members die, not from active addiction, but from, different things. But that gets us closer together in that bond that we share. We can really share that bond. Like there's mothers in here that have children. My wife and I are thinking about having children. And we talked about, it's like, well, all the drugs that I did, and she didn't really do a lot of different drugs. And it's like, well, can we have healthy children? What happens if we have a child that, and you project all this, but like I said, it's God's will. I mean, if we have a child that's handicapped, God put that person in our life because that's what we're supposed to work on. But you don't look at that. You want this perfect relationship and perfect this. And we can project, but God's will is let's stay in today, let's do today. We don't know we can do these things. Then people tell us, well, we can't have children, you can't adopt children because you were incarcerated. And it's like, why am I being picked out because but I did, because that was part of me to grow up and find recovery. If I never went to prison, that was God's will too, I never would have found recovery. Because it took me being incarcerated, because when I was in there and I got out and a person was sharing, when I was in prison, hell, I didn't, it's like when I walked in those doors, I knew half the people. And when I got out, a person was sharing to me, and I was in prison in active addiction. I knew everybody's bathroom. I didn't know life. I went from dope house to dope house to dope house, and I sold dope. So I just knew bathrooms. I didn't have no life. Today I have a life. And that's what it was. That's God's will, and that's why I'm living today, and that's why I try to promote this fellowship, and I try to do the best I can not to use. And I'm grateful for everybody being here, and I'm grateful that there is this program. And with that, I'll, be quiet. Thank you.
No problem. I'm a recovering addict named Diane. Hi, Diane. And I don't know, I struggle with God's will and my will because I keep waiting for the newspaper, the phone call, the telegram, and it doesn't come. And some days I have a better understanding, and some days I don't. But God's been bringing people into my life through this fellowship that just totally blow me away. And I can remember a while back that I was really, really struggling. I didn't trust God at that time. There were some things coming down, and it was like I didn't know how to trust God. And I called up a friend of mine that I had met some years ago. In fact, when NA first came to my community, there was some construction going on, so some boomers just suddenly, there was a lot of boomers in town, and a lot of strong people from Narcotics Anonymous, which was really good because it helped us to have NA because we didn't have a clue how to do that, And one of them I've stayed in touch with over the years, a couple of them I have, but I can remember calling this guy up from Georgia and saying, Charles, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. and he said, well, there's always God, Diane. And I said, well, I don't know, I'm really struggling with that right now. Where I'm at, I'm through one of these growing things, and I'm struggling with God, and I don't know how to do that right now. He said, could God be good, orderly direction? And I said, well, hell, if God could be good, orderly direction, would I be calling you if I knew what good, orderly direction was? Because I don't know what good, orderly direction is, or I wouldn't be where I am. Well, Diane, could good, orderly direction be the 12 steps and the 12 traditions of Narcotics Anonymous? And it was like, wow, yeah, could be, real simple stuff, work the steps. I couldn't get there, and sometimes, I don't know who it was talking about standing on the tracks, and I don't see that light, and I don't hear that whistle. It's just I don't know how to get there or how to do that. And that's why I need to keep coming back. Keep coming to the meetings. Stay connected with recovering people. Because there are times that I can't break it down. I don't know how to break it down. And I didn't know how to get past my hang up with God on the third step where I was at on this particular issue, because I couldn't get I couldn't get through there. And I couldn't think step one. I couldn't think good orderly direction. Because I got so hung up in the words and the rationalization and the justification and all that bullshit that we get spinning in our heads that I couldn't get there, you know. And so I have a lot of gratitude for the people that God puts in my lives, you know. I was listening to a tape before I came in here, and the guy was talking about Forrest Gump. Made me think of someone last year here at the convention was playing ping pong, and I said, you ought to do better than that. I watched Forrest Gump, you know. And without missing a heartbeat, this girl says, oh God, make Diana Bird so she can fly far, far away, you know. And this guy was talking about Forrest Gump and relating it to recovery, and it's given me a whole new perspective on Forrest Gump, you know. And I walked in, and here she sat, you know, I'm thinking, dear God, make Diana Bird, let her fly far, far away. And here I am, I'm still here. You know, but that's how it works in my life. I don't always see it. It don't come from where I think it should come from, you know, and I can't always keep it simple. But y'all do. Y'all help me to do that and to see what it is that I need to see so that I can continue to grow. I'm real grateful to be here. Thanks.
Over here.
I knew it.
That's not God's will. I don't know what is. My name is April, and I'm an addict. Man, sometimes you wish people would just forget. You know, it's like, man, don't remind me of where I've come from. But you know, that's real good today, because it helps me to recognize the progress. You know, and even though I do some things in humor, I do know that last year was my first time here, and that was God's will, because I was doing everything in my power to get out on the East Coast to a different convention, and I was able to see that big inner city people were coming in for this, and it was just a joy to know that there was something other people saw in this convention, and that I could sit still long enough and take it in and grow from it, and I did. I mean, I made friends that will last a lifetime here, you know, and I'm growing some this weekend. One thing I do know, I did get to go to Paris to the World Convention, and that was my first time ever flying, and I can't really say that it started out God's will. I think I self-willed a lot of that. To me, that was addict behavior, never flying and then choosing to go over an ocean for several hours. It was real interesting. But I do know that once I got there and I was among other recovering addicts, it was real evident to me that it was God's will, and I was in the midst of it, and I was not going to shortchange myself from anything by getting in the way. And I talked to an addict that was really just hours away from my hometown, and that addict told me that, and this is a third-hand story, but a lady in the fellowship in his area, she was saying there was drugs in her house. I mean, she had children using, selling, and you know, here she was just trying to recover and stay clean. And the only place she couldn't even pray and feel like, you know, God was really hearing her. And the only place she could go was downstairs in the basement. And she would sit on the bottom step and she would just sit there. And she would pray, you know, what do you want me to do? And this one particular time, it just dawned on her that she was sitting on the solution. She was sitting on the steps. She needed to work the steps, you know, and I am a firm believer that the growth is in the steps. And we have honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, that how solution, and it does work, you know, and I think it helps you to approach the steps. But if you really want to get down to who your true person is, you need to have a willingness to work the steps. steps. And I resisted them for a long time. And now that I'm working them, I could never see anything different. You know, I do believe, I come from a background where my higher power was predefined for me, and he had certain rules and regulations. And like that brother that was sharing earlier, if you went against any of those, there was supposed, punishment that came with that. And when I got here, that organization that I was heavily involved in, they told me, you need to choose between NA and this. They told me that this was not a spiritual program. And so it was like, man, that higher power that I grew up with was all of a sudden being taken away from me. And I really, it took me a long time to get with that. It's like, man, I couldn't even pray for a long time. I couldn't pray because I was believing this BS, and through Narcotics Anonymous, I know today that I can have a God of my own understanding, a higher power that is mine, that is a loving, caring spirit. And I can be amidst his will regardless of what any organization tells me. This is a God-given program. And I won't dishonor anybody else's higher power by trying to put a label on mine, especially when I'm before other addicts. The higher power you develop is of your choosing, as long as he's a loving and caring spirit. And we all did some crazy stuff in our addiction, and we know that it was a force beyond us that got us through. And I believe the sole purpose is so that each one of us could be here today, to carry the message to the still suffering addict. I'm looking at a newcomer now, and I just saw him going up some stairs, and I wanted to grab his legs. I was like, are you okay? I just wanted to grab him and reach out to him. And I said a quick prayer, and I just went on into the lounge, and I said, you know what? He's probably getting to the core of some of the stuff that's really hurting. Sometimes we need that peace and that quiet, and you're in a safe environment to do some isolating. You are in a safe environment. And we love you, and you just keep coming back and don't use in between. And if you do, dust your ass off, call somebody and get to a meeting. We love you.
My name's Lori, and I'm an addict. It's really unique, weird. When being programming chair, I had the, what's the word I'm looking for? There you go, thank you, privilege of being a part of the workshop topics. And this was like, this workshop, God's Will versus My Will, was the first one I thought, I want to be at that one. I want to be a part of that one. I want, I'm real good at that. And so I passed the notebook around to the subcommittee and let them pick out anything they wanted to do first. And an addict put his name down to do this workshop. And I was like, shit. And they said, well, speak at one. No, people from our area wasn't supposed to be able to speak. Well, unless it was an utmost emergency. Well, it was an emergency as of yesterday night. Yesterday night? Last night, when I talked to Anita. And I'm sorry, Anita, but I have to share this. It was the first time since I've been in recovery in almost 2 years that I approached someone and I asked them, would you be a speaker at this workshop? And she's like, what's the topic? And I'm like, God's will versus my will. She said, oh, great. Gee, I wonder how that happened or something like that. And then she just looked up and said, must be God's working, you bastard. And I was like, oh my God, she's cussing out him. And I went to my sponsor later on and I said, Anita really floored me. And she said, why? And I said, she called God a bastard, and she said, she can do that. And I was like, you're my sponsor. You're supposed to say, she can't do that. And it just floored me. And when I was introducing you, Anita, I thought about that, and I just started laughing. And I'm sorry, but you really flipped me on that one. Now, back on the topic here. My will wasn't to come here. I'm not going to lie. My will was to stay in active addiction. I knew I had a problem. I knew I wanted to do something about my addiction. But I didn't have the guts or the will to do the footwork into getting out of it. Gut level honesty, I was 6 months behind in my house payment. Still had our house, which is totally amazing to me. I had double utilities, and on a daily basis was calling them up and saying, can I come in on such and such date, pay this amount? My family, my one sister, my oldest sister, was, my mom was a waitress, and she worked split shifts. And my mom was also an alcoholic. So I really didn't see my mom when I was younger. My oldest sister brought me up pretty much. And that person, which is my safe person, my sister Sharon, almost gave up on me. All she could do was pray. She wanted to stay away from me. And I kept saying, but all I did was one substance, you know, that's all I did. 3 years ago, I'm thinking about Doreen's last night, her sharing. 3 years ago, I lost my mom, March 28th. It's unique. Doreen lost her mom March 27th. And I just started crying through this, you know. When I lost my mom, I was on a pill for migraines because I had migraines severely. She had 7 different cancers. And when I lost her, I buried myself literally in my addiction. Both substances and mega money a week. I mean hundreds of dollars a week. I didn't want to live after she died. I wanted to be right there with her. She was my best friend. She was my backbone. She was everything it took for me to live day to day. And I truly believe that that was the God of my understanding working in her. My husband told me, I did the bills and thought I just had control of everything. And he told me a year and a half after she passed away, Lori, this isn't getting any better. We've got to do something. The bills are this bad and our house is next and could be your children. And I was like, well, why don't they have, you know, Drug Users of America or something like that, a support group, you know? And he's like, well, we can do this on our own. All right. I just buried myself a little bit farther. God sent me this woman to talk to, and on the worst day of my life, I was out of dope, out of patience, out of tolerance, and just wanted to end my life. The night before that, I put a gun to my head. I was ready, but I was too chicken. The only thought kept running across my mind was, number one, I won't see my children ever again, because that's truly what I believed in active addiction. And number two, if I shoot and kill myself, that's a Catholic sin. I'm going to go to hell. So I'm not going to be able to see my mom either. So I didn't do it. Them are the only two things I remember. The next morning, my doctor's nurse, an addict that's in the program in South Bend, Indiana, her mom was my doctor's nurse, and she happened to come over. And I just spilled my guts. She picked up the phone, called her daughter, and her daughter took me to my first meeting that night. That was God's will. I didn't want to stop. I'm not going to lie, I didn't want to stop. I was too busy
without realizing it, trying to kill myself. God's will kept me in this program. I relapsed 10 days after I got clean. I'll be celebrating 2 years, June 12th, through you people. April was one of the first faces I seen. And I really got to get with her later because I really got some shit on me I need to get off. And I watched her grow with a lot of love in her heart. Her name's on my first phone list. She means a lot to me. I was really excited about this convention this year, and I'm really, really grateful that God put the position in this convention in my life. It's gave me a new aspect of gratitude, a new aspect of serenity. I hate this shirt. It says Serenity Keeper on the back. Bull. I'm anything but serene throughout this thing. Running from meeting to meeting thinking, oh no, I got no speakers. And by the way, if someone wants to speak on one, I got a workshop open. Writing a tool in recovery, I need one speaker. And an addict come up to me and said yesterday, well, why don't you speak at a workshop? And I really wanted to say, up yours. Why don't you? And then it dawned on me she is. I never thought about speaking at a workshop, period. Just really grateful to be here, grateful to see the faces that I looked forward to seeing. I'm sure glad Loretta's back here. All year long, Mark made a comment last year. Chuck, that makes Loretta feel better. And every time I talk about Loretta in South Bend, it's Loretta who. And I always say, Loretta, that makes Chuck feel better. And first time I seen her, that was the first thing I said. And it's memories like this that keep me going from year to year. I'm just real grateful. I'm speechless. I got a lot of spirituality this weekend with one-on-ones with people, and I really appreciate, and I will never take for granted another addict after this weekend, because I am seeing miracles that are happening. Is there anybody else that wants to share? Okay. And the workshop on time and close with group hug and serenity prayer, so I guess that's what we'll do.